Nathan Cade had been driving for hours. The road stretched out endlessly beneath a sky full of stars. The hum of the truck's engine was the only sound that kept him company. He was used to this kind of solitude. After leaving the military, he found peace in the quiet, away from the chaos of war. His life had slowed down, filled with long drives and an occasional job fixing engines for people who couldn't quite handle their broken-down machines. But tonight, the night felt different. There was something in the air. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, like there was something just beyond the edge of his vision. Nathan tightened his grip on the steering wheel and glanced into his rearview mirror. The road was empty. Nothing unusual. But then, in a flash of silver, something appeared out of nowhere, standing right in front of his truck. He slammed on the brakes, sending the tires skidding across the asphalt. The headlights illuminated a woman. No, something else entirely. Tall, with skin that shimmered like polished metal, and eyes that gleamed a deep shade of violet. Nathan's heart raced as he stared at her, unable to move. There was no mistaking it. This was no human. She was an alien. The woman's figure seemed almost translucent in the moonlight, her clothes clinging to her like they were part of her skin. Her long, dark hair fluttered despite the stillness of the night, as though it had a life of its own. Nathan was frozen, unsure whether he should drive away or get out and confront the strange being in front of him. He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. This was impossible. Aliens weren't real, at least not in the way he thought. They were just stories, myths, things you read about in sci-fi novels. This couldn't be happening. Then, to his surprise, she spoke, but not with her mouth. It was as if the words were simply there in his head, clear and direct. "I need your help, human." Her voice was calm, but there was a sense of urgency in it that sent a shiver down his spine. Nathan blinked, still processing what was happening. Was this some kind of hallucination? He shook his head, trying to snap out of the confusion. But before he could gather his thoughts, the truck's engine sputtered and died. The dashboard lights flickered out, and the air around him grew thick with an almost electric tension. Nathan reached for the ignition, trying to restart the engine, but it was as though the truck had become nothing more than a hunk of metal. The woman didn't move, her gaze unwavering, yet there was something strangely reassuring about it. "Don't be afraid," she said, her voice reaching him once more, this time softer, almost comforting. "I will not hurt you, but you must help me." Nathan's mind raced. What was going on? Why was she here? Was she alone? And most importantly, what could he possibly do for an alien? But the feeling in his gut told him that ignoring her would be a mistake he couldn't afford to make. "What do you want from me?" Nathan finally managed to ask, his voice hoarse. The alien woman stepped closer, her violet eyes glowing with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. "I need you to listen. The fate of your world depends on it." Nathan Cade stood in stunned silence as the alien woman's words echoed in his mind. The weight of her statement lingered, and he couldn't quite grasp what was happening. The truck sat motionless, as though the world itself had paused, holding its breath. Her violet eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, everything else, the endless night, the empty highway, seemed to fade away. "The fate of your world depends on it," she repeated, her voice soft but urgent. Nathan shook his head, trying to process the impossible. This couldn't be real, could it? Aliens were just stories, legends. He had spent his entire life in the real world, fighting wars, surviving, fixing things. Yet here he was, facing something so far beyond his understanding. "I don't know what you're talking about," Nathan finally said, his voice strained. "Why me? I'm just some mechanic. You've got to be mistaken." The woman's gaze softened, but her expression remained intense. "You are more than you realize, Nathan Cade," she said, the words like a weight on his chest. She took a step closer, her shimmering silver skin glowing faintly in the truck's headlights. Nathan instinctively took a step back, but she didn't seem threatening. If anything, she appeared almost desperate, as though time was running out. "I am Vereshna, and I come from a distant world," she continued. "My people, the Xilari, have enslaved countless civilizations across the galaxy. They will come for yours next, unless you act." Nathan's heart pounded in his chest. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. Xilari, enslaving civilizations. It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel. Yet here was this woman. No, this alien, standing in front of him, telling him that the fate of Earth rested on his shoulders. His mind raced, but he couldn't make sense of it. "Why are you telling me all of this?" Nathan asked, his voice shaky. "I'm no hero. I'm not even involved in anything that matters." Vereshna didn't look angry, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. "Because you are human. You are resilient. Your kind has something that the Xilari fear, your ability to adapt, to survive." She paused, her gaze intensifying. "I need your help, Nathan. You are the only one who can stop them. You are the only one who can give us a chance." Nathan felt a cold chill creep up his spine. Was she asking him to fight against an alien empire? Him, just a regular guy, a mechanic who'd been through his fair share of battles, but nothing like this. Still, there was something in her voice, something real, that made him believe she wasn't lying. But why him? Why had she chosen him, out of all the people in the world? Vereshna took a deep breath and seemed to gather herself before speaking again. "The Xilari have been watching your planet for a long time. They believe that Earth is weak, that humanity is nothing more than a primitive species, easily manipulated. They think your people will fall without even realizing it. But they're wrong. You have something they can never understand: free will, the ability to think, to fight, and to change." Nathan swallowed hard, trying to keep his composure. But the weight of what she was saying was beginning to sink in. The Earth was in danger. The world he knew could be destroyed, and he had no idea how to stop it. But one thing was clear: he couldn't turn his back on this. If there was even the smallest chance to stop the Xilari, he had to take it. "Okay," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll help you. But you'd better start making sense, because none of this is adding up." Vereshna's eyes softened, and for the first time, she smiled. A small, fleeting smile that held a hint of hope. "Thank you, Nathan. You have no idea what you've just agreed to. But I promise you, this will change everything." Nathan Cade felt his heart pounding in his chest as he stared at the alien woman, Vereshna, still trying to wrap his mind around what was happening. He had always been a practical man, someone who relied on reason and logic to get by. But none of this made any sense. His truck was dead, sitting in the middle of an empty road in the dead of night. And now he was agreeing to help an alien woman who claimed that humanity's future depended on it. It felt like a nightmare, but deep down, Nathan knew this wasn't something he could walk away from. "Where do we start?" Nathan asked, his voice shaky but determined. Vereshna didn't hesitate. "We need to move quickly," she said, her voice calm and focused. "The Xilari have already detected my escape. They will send hunters to track me down. We don't have much time." Nathan's mind raced as he processed her words. Hunters. That didn't sound good. If the Xilari were as dangerous as she said, this could be a fight for his life. But he had been in tight situations before. He had survived more than one battle and come out alive. This was different. He was about to be dragged into an intergalactic conflict that he wasn't prepared for. But even as fear began to creep in, there was something else, a spark of curiosity, maybe even excitement. Could it be true? Could humanity really be facing an alien invasion? "Where do we go now?" Nathan asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be simple. Vereshna's violet eyes narrowed as she glanced up at the night sky. "There is a place I can take you, a safe house, hidden from the Xilari's eyes. But we need to move fast. The more time we waste, the closer the hunters get." Nathan nodded, trying to push down the growing sense of unease in his stomach. How do we get there? My truck is out of commission, and I'm guessing you don't have a spare spaceship tucked away somewhere. Vereshna smiled, a brief flash of amusement crossing her features. I have a ship, but it's not exactly in the best condition. We'll need to find a way to get there without drawing attention. Nathan frowned. A broken ship? Seriously? Her smile faded, replaced by the serious, urgent look she had worn when they first met. Trust me, it will work, but we need to be careful. The HFY have advanced technology that can track us anywhere, even across the stars. We cannot afford to be careless. Nathan looked down at his truck, the engine still cold and lifeless. He could see the faint glow of a distant star in the sky, and for the first time in his life, he felt a strange sense of awe. This was real. The world he knew was about to change in ways he couldn't even begin to imagine. Okay, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. Let's do this. But you better be right about this safe house, because I'm not running into the unknown without some answers. Vereshna nodded, her expression softening slightly. I understand. And you will have them, Nathan. But for now, we must keep moving. With a quick motion, she stepped away from the truck and began walking toward the tree line, her silver figure barely visible in the darkness. Nathan hesitated for a moment, then followed. Whatever this was, it had already started, and there was no turning back. Nathan Cade followed Vereshna through the dense underbrush, his boots crunching quietly on the dried leaves as they made their way through the dark woods. The cool night air felt crisp against his skin, but it did little to calm the storm of thoughts in his mind. Everything had happened so fast. First the alien woman, then the dead truck, and now a journey into some kind of safe house that was supposed to protect them from an enemy he could hardly comprehend. He had no idea what was really going on, but one thing was clear: his life would never be the same again. The further they walked, the more Nathan found himself questioning everything he thought he knew. Could the world really be in danger from an alien race? Could they be so advanced that humanity stood no chance? He thought about all the people he had known, his old friends, the soldiers who fought beside him, and how they would react if they knew the truth. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was far bigger than anything he had ever been a part of. Vereshna's presence was oddly calming in the midst of the chaos. There was something about her that radiated a quiet confidence, as though she had faced down far worse than anything Nathan could imagine. Her strides were long and purposeful, and her eyes constantly scanned the surroundings, alert to any potential threats. She moved like someone who had been running for her life. And maybe, in a way, she had been. Finally, they'd reached the clearing at the edge of the forest. It was hidden well, tucked away in a shadowed corner of the woods, and for a moment, Nathan could hardly believe it. There, nestled between the trees, was an old abandoned cabin, its wood weathered and overgrown with vines. From a distance, it looked like any other forgotten structure, but Nathan noticed the faint glow coming from within, as if something was powering the place from inside. This is it, Vereshna said quietly, glancing back at him. Inside, you'll find the tools you need to understand what's happening, but be prepared. The HFY have ways of tracking, even across the most remote areas. She motioned for him to follow her inside. Nathan hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. The cabin looked more like a military hideout than a place for rest. As he walked in, his eyes adjusted to the dim light, revealing a large space filled with strange equipment and makeshift technology that he didn't recognize. There were screens flashing with cryptic data, wires snaking across the floor, and a table covered with blueprints that made no sense to him. Vereshna moved swiftly to the center of the room, where a large console sat, blinking with life. She began typing quickly on the interface, and suddenly the walls of the cabin flickered, revealing a hidden control center beneath the surface. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. It was clear now that this cabin wasn't just some abandoned place. It was a command center in disguise. Whoever built this, they were preparing for war, Nathan muttered, glancing around in awe. Exactly, Vereshna replied, not looking up from her work. The Xilari have known for years that Earth would be a target. This facility was built by those who tried to warn humanity, long before I came here. But the threat is much greater now, and we have little time. She handed Nathan a small, sleek device, its surface glowing softly. This is a communicator. It will allow us to contact those who can help. But it's not just a tool for calling for help. It's a way to send a message that will reach the Xilari and tell them we're ready for them. We'll fight, Nathan, and we will not be afraid. Nathan held the device in his hands, feeling the weight of its importance. His mind raced, the reality of what was happening slowly settling in. He wasn't just in some small-town fight anymore. This was real, and humanity's future was hanging in the balance. He looked at Vereshna, who had stopped working to watch him. You're right about one thing. This is bigger than anything I've ever done. But I'm in. Her gaze softened for just a moment, and Nathan could see the hope in her eyes. Good. The fight starts now. Nathan Cade sat at the makeshift table, staring at the small communicator in his hands. The quiet hum of the cabin's equipment filled the room as he tried to process everything. The alien woman, Vereshna, had handed him the device with a seriousness that weighed heavily on his shoulders. It wasn't just a tool, it was humanity's lifeline, a way to strike back against the Xilari before they could destroy everything he knew. The task before him was enormous, and it was hard to believe that he, a simple mechanic with no experience in war, was supposed to be part of the solution. But the look in Vereshna's eyes, the quiet desperation, told him there was no turning back. He glanced at Vereshna, who was busy scanning through the screens, her hands moving with the grace of someone used to operating complex technology. She was relentless, her focus sharp, yet there was a weariness about her, an exhaustion that seemed to weigh her down with every passing second. Nathan could tell that she was more than just a fugitive running from her own people. She was a woman with a burden far heavier than he could imagine. But the Xilari were coming, and they were not going to stop until they had wiped humanity off the map. If they didn't act soon, it could be too late. Vereshna finally turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "The Xilari will send scouts soon to find us. They'll track us down if we stay here too long. We need to get to their relay station, a hidden outpost in orbit, and send the message before they close the gates." Nathan frowned, his brow furrowing as he tried to understand. "How do you know where this relay station is? And how the hell are we supposed to get to space? I'm no astronaut." Vereshna gave him a quick, almost amused look, though there was no humor in her eyes. "The Xilari leave a trail. I've studied their movements for years, learned their patterns. The relay station is one of their most important communication hubs. If we can send a signal from there, the rest of the galaxy will know what the Xilari are planning. And you think we can just waltz in, send the message, and waltz out?" Nathan asked skeptically. "We don't have a choice," Vereshna replied simply, her voice steady. "This is the only way. The Xilari don't believe humans can fight back. But if they realize we know what they're up to, they'll panic. Panic leads to mistakes, and mistakes can cost them everything." Nathan was silent for a long moment, his mind racing. Could they really pull this off? Could he really be part of something that could change the course of human history? The weight of it all felt heavy on his shoulders, but at the same time, a part of him felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. He was used to being the guy in the background, fixing things when they broke. But now he was being asked to fix the world. "All right," he said finally, his voice firm with resolve. "Let's say we get there. We're still going to need a ship, and last time I checked, my truck doesn't exactly have an engine powerful enough to get us into space." Vereshna nodded. "I have a contact. A pilot who owes me a favor. He'll get us to the relay station. But we need to move fast. The Xilari are already hunting me, and they'll stop at nothing to find us." Nathan stood up, tucking the communicator into his jacket pocket. "Then let's go. If this is the fight we're taking on, I'm not going to waste time. I'll follow you anywhere, but I need to know you've got a plan. Varishna smiled for the first time since they met, a brief flash of warmth in her eyes. I have a plan, Nathan. And with your help, it's going to work. Nathan nodded, feeling a spark of confidence. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As they moved toward the exit, ready to face whatever came next, he couldn't shake the feeling that the fate of humanity was now in his hands, and he wasn't going to let it slip away without a fight. Nathan Cade followed Varishna through the dense forest toward a small clearing where a hidden ship lay waiting. His mind was still reeling from everything that had happened since the alien woman had appeared in front of his truck. Now, they were on a mission to send a message that could save Earth from a powerful alien empire. The thought was almost too much to handle, but there was no time to doubt. The Exilari were coming, and the clock was ticking. As they approached the clearing, Nathan could see the outline of the ship, a sleek, futuristic craft unlike anything he had ever seen. The metallic surface shimmered under the moonlight, reflecting the trees and sky like a mirror. It looked small but sturdy, with a design that seemed both alien and familiar at the same time. Nathan couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This was the kind of ship you read about in science fiction books, not something you'd ever expect to see in real life. Varishna seemed to sense his amazement and gave him a brief, knowing look. It's not much, but it will get us where we need to go, she said, her voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. She moved toward the ship's hatch, which slid open with a soft hiss as she approached. Inside, the controls were a mix of alien technology and human engineering, complex, but not entirely foreign to someone who had spent years working with machinery. Nathan couldn't help but feel a pang of excitement. This was his world, after all. Mechanics, engines, and fixing things. And this ship was broken, in need of repair. He could do that. What's wrong with it? Nathan asked as he stepped inside, scanning the control panels. Varishna didn't hesitate. It's not much of a problem, she said, as though it were a simple fix. Just some systems that need recalibrating. The power core's running low, but we'll be fine once we get it online. You'll know what to do. Nathan raised an eyebrow. You really trust me with this, huh? I trust you more than you realize, Varishna replied, offering him a small but genuine smile. You're not just a mechanic, Nathan. You have something the Xilari will never understand. Resourcefulness. That's why you're here. He swallowed, feeling the weight settle on his chest. Her words were both encouraging and terrifying. He wasn't just fixing a broken car anymore. This was an alien ship, a vessel that would carry them to a battle that could change the fate of the world. But there was no turning back. Nathan had already made his choice, and he wasn't about to back down now. As he moved to the power core, he could feel the quiet hum of the ship beneath his hands. The energy was unlike anything he had ever encountered, pulsing with a strange, foreign rhythm. It was both mesmerizing and unsettling. Nathan adjusted the controls, following the instructions Varishna had given him, his mind fully focused on the task at hand. The ship came to life with a sudden surge of power, and the hum grew louder, vibrating through his bones. The lights flickered on, and the ship's systems came online, one by one. Nathan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. It's good to go, he said, turning to Varishna, who nodded in approval. We have no time to waste, she said, moving to the cockpit and taking her seat. Get in. The Exilari are already looking for us. Once we leave the atmosphere, we'll have a better chance of hiding from their scanners. Nathan climbed into the seat beside her, strapping himself in. As the ship's engines roared to life, the ground beneath them shook, and the trees around them seemed to sway with the force. With a final glance at the earth below them, Nathan felt the ship lift off the ground, slowly at first, then faster, until they were soaring through the night sky. As the ship broke through the clouds and headed toward space, Nathan's heart raced. There was no turning back. They were on their way to a battle for the future of humanity. But for the first time in a long while, Nathan felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The stars stretched out in front of them as the ship soared higher, cutting through the atmosphere with surprising ease. Nathan Cade couldn't help but stare out the window, the vastness of space before him taking his breath away. It was nothing like the roads he was used to. No lines on the pavement, no familiar landmarks, just endless darkness and twinkling stars, as far as the eye could see. The hum of the engines was steady and strong, and the ship seemed to move with a kind of grace that made it feel like they weren't just flying. They were gliding, as if weightless. Vereshna was focused, her hands flying over the control panels with practiced precision. She spoke in a calm voice, barely above a whisper, as she adjusted the ship's trajectory. "We're almost in the clear," she said, her eyes flicking to the blinking lights on the console. "Once we reach the outer orbit, we'll be able to avoid detection. The HFY have a vast network of sensors, but we'll be out of their range soon enough." Nathan nodded, gripping the armrests of his seat. He could feel the pressure of space pushing against the ship, and for a moment, the familiar pull of gravity seemed distant. He had always imagined space to be cold and empty, but now, as he soared through it, he felt something else, something almost alive. Maybe it was the weight of what they were about to do, the message they were about to send, that made it all feel so intense. It wasn't just about escaping the HFY. This was about taking a stand. This was humanity's last chance to fight back. "So, what's the plan once we reach the relay station?" Nathan asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the growing nervousness in his stomach. Vereshna's eyes flicked to him briefly, then back to the controls. "Once we get to the station, we'll send the message. It's a simple transmission, but it will carry a lot of weight. We'll alert the other systems in the galaxy to the HFY's plans. We'll show them that Earth isn't as helpless as they think." "Just send a message, and that's it?" Nathan asked. "That doesn't sound too bad." Vereshna's lips tightened into a thin line. "It's not that simple. The HFY will know what we're trying to do. They won't just let us send a signal without retaliation. They'll try to stop us." Nathan's stomach turned. "So, what's the plan if they attack?" "We fight," Vereshna said flatly. "We don't have a choice. If they find us, we'll have to make a stand. We have no backup. We'll have to rely on the ship and your skills to get us out of there." Nathan's hands clenched into fists. This was real. There was no sugarcoating it now. He wasn't just in some adventure. This was life and death. The HFY were ruthless, and they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. If they didn't succeed in sending the message, Earth would be exposed to their invasion, and it would be too late to fight back. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "So, we're not just getting in and getting out. We're going to be in the middle of a battle." Vereshna didn't look up, but he could hear the resolve in her voice. "Yes, but we're ready. We have one advantage: surprise. The HFY will expect us to flee, but we're not going to give them the satisfaction. We'll strike first." Nathan's eyes narrowed as he took in her words. There was no backing down now. They were in this together, and the stakes were higher than he could ever have imagined. The unknown ahead of them was daunting, but he was done running. The urgency in Vereshna's eyes told him she wasn't afraid. She had been running from that HFY for too long. Now, it was time to fight. As the ship sped toward its destination, the vastness of space before them, Nathan felt a strange calm settling over him. This was it. No turning back. And for the first time, he was ready to face whatever came next. The silence of space enveloped the ship as it hurtled closer to the HFY relay station, the vastness outside almost suffocating in its emptiness. Nathan Cade's heart pounded in his chest as he sat beside Vereshna, his eyes fixed on the screen in front of him. The stars outside were a distant, cold light now, the danger ahead much closer and far more tangible. Every passing second seemed to stretch longer, and the weight of what they were about to do pressed on him more than ever. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a fight for survival. Varishna's voice broke through the tension. "We'll be within range in a few minutes. Once we get close enough to the relay station, I'll need you to keep the systems running. If we get detected, I'll have to make evasive maneuvers. The ship can only take so much damage." Her words were calm, but Nathan could hear the tension beneath them. "Got it," Nathan said, his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his bones. His hands gripped the seat beneath him, and he tried to focus on the console in front of him. He had no idea how this ship worked beyond the basics, but there was no time to think about that now. This was his chance to prove he could do more than fix a broken engine. He had to keep this ship running, no matter what. As the countdown continued, the distance between them and the relay station shortened. Nathan could feel the shift in the air, the ship's engines humming more powerfully as they neared their destination. Every fiber of his being screamed to brace for impact, to prepare for the inevitable battle ahead. But all he could do was focus on the small details, the flickering lights, the soft hum of the machinery, the rhythmic pulse of the power core that now seemed to echo in his mind. "They're out there, aren't they?" Nathan asked, his voice low, almost to himself. Varishna nodded without taking her eyes off the controls. "They've already set up patrols. They know something's coming. If we're lucky, they won't know it's us until it's too late." Nathan's heart skipped a beat at the thought. If they're lucky. It was a sobering reminder of how dangerous their mission really was. The HFY were far more advanced than humanity, their ships sleek and deadly. But the truth was, they couldn't afford to wait and hope for a better plan. This was the only chance they had. Suddenly, the console flickered, and the warning lights flashed a sharp red. Nathan's eyes shot to the screen, and his pulse raced. "We've been spotted," he said quickly, his voice rising with urgency. Varishna's face hardened, and she wasted no time. "Brace yourself," she said, pushing a series of buttons. The ship lurched as it swerved sharply to the left, narrowly avoiding a pulse of energy that shot past them, crackling through the dark void. Nathan's stomach dropped as the ship rattled with the force of the evasive maneuver. His hands flew over the controls, adjusting the power flow to keep the engine stable. Every second counted now. They were no longer just entering the relay station. They were in the middle of a firefight. He could feel the adrenaline flooding his veins, his mind working faster than it ever had before. The ship groaned under the strain, and the atmosphere in the cockpit grew tense, every decision critical. "We need to get closer," Varishna said, her voice sharp. "I'll keep them off our tail, but you have to keep the systems running. Stay focused." Nathan nodded, doing his best to ignore the fear rising in his chest. This was no longer just about sending a message. This was about surviving long enough to send it. The HFY were relentless, and he knew they wouldn't stop until they had them in their grasp. The sound of the ship's engines groaned again as they pushed the craft to its limits, speeding toward the relay station. They were running out of time, and Nathan knew, deep down, that this would either be the moment that changed everything, or the moment everything fell apart. The auxiliary ships were closing in fast, their sleek forms cutting through the darkness of space with terrifying precision. Nathan Cade's pulse raced as the tension in the cockpit grew unbearable. A sharp hum of the ship's engines filled his ears, but it was drowned out by the pounding of his own heart. He had never imagined he would be here, in the midst of a fight for humanity's survival, surrounded by enemies far more advanced than anything he'd ever seen. But there was no time for doubt now. The relay station loomed ahead, a giant structure in the darkness, and it was their only chance to send the signal that could change everything. "We're almost there," Varishna said, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding outside. "I'll keep the HFY off our backs as long as I can, but once we get within range of the station, you have to transmit the message. You can do it, Nathan." Nathan nodded, though his stomach churned. He had never been in a situation like this. His whole life had been spent fixing things, machines, engines, and systems, but never a planet's fate. Yet as he looked at the glowing screens, his hands found their place on the controls instinctively. It was like everything he had ever done, every repair he had ever made, had led him to this moment. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was the one who could make a difference. The first blast from the auxiliary ship hit the ship's hull, and the impact sent a jolt through Nathan's body. Sparks flew from the control panel, and he cursed under his breath, quickly tapping the screen to stabilize the systems. The ship shuddered, but it held together. "We're taking hits," Nathan called out, his voice tense. "I know," Varishna replied, her hands flying over her own controls. "Hold on, we're getting into position." The ship swerved sharply as Varishna expertly dodged another shot, the vast station ahead growing larger by the second. Nathan's eyes were fixed on the monitor, scanning the data for any sign of a break in the auxiliary's attack. There was no room for error now. If they didn't make it to the station in time, the relay would be lost, and humanity would be at the mercy of the auxiliary. "Almost there," Varishna said, her voice tight with concentration. She pushed the ship to its limits, the engines roaring in response. Nathan's hands were a blur as he worked to keep the ship's systems running, ensuring that they had enough power to make it through. Then, the auxiliary made their move. A second ship, more massive than the first, appeared from the darkness, its weapons charging for another deadly shot. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. The larger ship was going to make sure they didn't make it. There was no way to outrun it. They had to fight. "Varishna," Nathan shouted, "we need to defend ourselves, or we won't get close enough." Varishna's lips tightened. "We'll do it together," she said, her eyes blazing with fierce determination. She activated the defense systems, and the ship suddenly jerked forward, firing back at the auxiliary vessel. The smaller ship veered to the side, narrowly avoiding another blast as it returned fire. But it wasn't enough to stop them. Nathan looked at the countdown timer on the console. The relay station was almost within range. The next few seconds were going to determine everything. With one final push, the ship sped forward, the laser blasts from the auxiliary ships zipping past them, too close for comfort. Finally, the ship was within the station's perimeter. "Now," Varishna yelled, "send the signal." Nathan's fingers flew over the transmission controls, his mind a blur of calculations. The moment he pressed the final button, a pulse of energy shot out from the ship, sending the message to every corner of the galaxy. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Humanity had a fighting chance now. "We did it," Nathan said, his voice low with disbelief. Varishna let out a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since they'd started this journey. But even then, she knew the fight was far from over. The auxiliary were angry, and they wouldn't let this go unanswered. But for the first time in a long while, Varishna allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. They had done it, and that small victory was just the beginning.